Welcome again to Earlswood Baptist Church House Group, and this week we're going to finish off chapter 6 before we move on to do something else. And we might call this little section of the book Multiple Miracles. The end of Mark 6 is a bit of a longer passage this week, but the stories, of course, are very familiar to us. Jesus feeds the 5,000, walks on water, and heals many, many people. Our reading is Mark 6:30-56, and once again, not Mark 5 as I put it on the next slide. So let's listen and enjoy these miracles of Jesus.
The apostles gathered round Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "That would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?" "How many loaves do you have?" he asked. "Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus told them to make all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout that whole region and carried those who were ill on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages, towns, or countryside, they placed those who were ill in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed.
There are lots of different things we could talk about from this passage, and I'll just try and pick out a few thoughts. Jesus attempts to get away from all the busyness and to get some rest and prayer, and it brings out how Jesus was totally God, yet totally human. He needed to rest and to spend time with his Father in prayer, and the continual ministry must have taken its toll on him. He needed time alone, but he found it very difficult to be alone, because he was quickly recognized and followed. Yet for Jesus, compassion for the people around him is more important than getting a rest. Perhaps there's things here that we can take away. As very much more humans, we need time to recover from busyness. We need time to talk to God. But sometimes life will be so hectic that our involvement and our compassion is perhaps more important than getting a rest. There'll be seasons of busyness. And for Jesus, miracles quickly followed. And perhaps they still do. As I was preparing this, I remembered something I shared about new wine a while back. So I'm going to replay this because it's a lovely story. We'll go to Kampala in Uganda.
And so I want to tell you one or two of the stories of some of the things we've seen. So I love miracles. I define a miracle as something that can't happen naturally. I like to keep it simple because then I understand it. A miracle is something that doesn't happen naturally. So let me give you one or two examples. In Kampala a few years ago, I needed to get a passport-sized photograph on a Sunday afternoon in the middle of a power cut. And I'd been told in the morning, on my flight was very early the next day into Sudan, where I was heading into, and I was suddenly told I needed 2 passport-sized photographs. I couldn't get a visa before I left home because there was an arrest warrant out for me in Sudan, which is a story that I'm not going to put on the tape, but if you want to know that one, ask me afterwards. And so I needed to get these photographs. And so I was trying to find out where I'd get these photographs from, and my guide and translator was saying, you will not get one of those, it's just not possible to do that. So I said, well, I believe in the impossible. So just find me a photo booth machine. He said, okay, we'll do that, but we need to do it a bit later on. The way we need to go to an orphanage, and we're going to buy some bread cakes and take them to the orphanage. There'll be about 200 children there, so we need to go and buy 200 bread cakes to feed these children. Now, he said there will be the children from the orphanage, but every Sunday there will also be a large number of children that walk up to 3-4 hours to get to the orphanage. And this bread cake, a large bread cake, will be the only thing they eat this week. He says, so we have to do that first. Do you mind waiting for your photograph? He says, guilt trip, it's called. So I said, yeah, that's fine. Obviously, we'll do that. So we bought 200 bread cakes, picked up the lady that ran the orphanage, and we drove to the orphanage. And I'm not very good at maths. It took me 3 attempts to get my maths O-level. That's just to give you a hint of my age. And when we got there, I looked around, and there was well over 200 children. My best estimate would be at least 500 children, probably nearer 600, but 500 kids sat on the grass looking excited because they were going to get fed. And the lady who ran the orphanage said, children, I've got some good news today and some bad news. The bad news, sorry, I got that the wrong way around. The good news is that we have bread cakes for you. And these children, they roared with excitement, they were cheering. And she said that the bad news is there's more of you than there are bread cakes. I will never, till the day I meet my Maker, I will never forget the expression on their faces when they've just been told, children that were only going to have this one meal that week, that there wasn't going to be enough for all of them. I will never forget the look and the impact that had upon me. And so she said, what do we do? I said, it's easy. We break each of the bread cakes in half, and we give them half a bread cake each. It's called wisdom, natural and supernatural. And she said, okay. She says, children, I have some really good news. There is a pastor here from England. He is going to do what Jesus did. He is going to pray for the bread, and it's going to be multiplied, and you're all going to get one. And they cheered. I got really, really excited. I thought, where is this pastor? And then I realized it was me. So I prayed my favorite prayer. Jesus, help! And I suddenly remembered Jesus took bread and he held it up and he gave thanks. He gave thanks before he saw the miracle. That's called faith. How often do we wait until after we see a miracle before we even think about giving thanks? That's called gratitude. It's good, but it isn't called faith. So I took the bread, not all of it, obviously, one symbolically, held it up, gave thanks, and then we gave out the bread cakes to the 500 plus kids who were there, and we collected up some bagfuls of leftovers. Don't know if you just got that. We fed 500 children with 200 bread cakes. That's quite good, isn't it? So the guy with me said, this is really good, but we've got leftovers, we can't waste it. Let's go find another orphanage. So we went along to another orphanage where there was approximately 300 children. We fed all of them with the bread cakes and collected up more bagfuls than we had at the end of the first one. That's now 800 children with 200 bread cakes. Then he said, we've got a problem. This seems to be growing each time we do it. I said, it's the kingdom principle of multiplication. Give away, you receive more. And so we went and we found another orphanage which was having an open day. And so there was another 500 people there. We fed all 500 people. That's now 1,300 people with 200 bread cakes. And we had 7 bread cakes left. And there was 7 of us on team. Isn't God good? So then I turned to the guy who was with me and said, now do you believe that we can make a photo machine work even in a power cut? And he said, I believe anything. I said, find me a photo machine. So we went and we drove around Kampala, complete blackout in the city, and we found one of those 60s or 70s photo machines. Anybody remember those? Yeah. And we found this thing. It was being run by a lovely Muslim gentleman. And what he'd done was he'd cut through the paving slabs, cut into the ring main of the city to get his electricity to power this thing. But at the moment, it wasn't even plugged in. The plug was just lying there. So I said to him, I need some photographs. And I said, I need color ones. He said, well, 2 things. This is a black and white machine. And secondly, I have no power. So I said, let me explain something to you. My God is the God that gave people the ability to know how to generate electricity. Therefore, my God is more than able to give us enough power to make your machine work and to give me the photographs. By now, there's a little bit of a crowd gathering, a bit of a commotion. So I laid hands. I'm full of faith. I've seen the bread cakes. I laid hands on a photo machine. That's called stupidity. And I said, Lord, give me power for this machine in the name of Jesus. And then I sat on the sort of seat thing inside, and I said to him, press the button now. And he closed the curtain. His shaking hand came in. He pressed the button. Instantly, there were 4 flashes, and instantly, 4 color photographs came out of a black and white machine that wasn't plugged in. Isn't God good?
That's quite some story, isn't it? And I just love it, and it's been great to hear it again. But returning quickly to the passage, doing something that a house group doesn't often do, in these 2 stories, perhaps Mark especially draws out Jesus' supremacy over the natural world. And maybe we shouldn't necessarily see this as a matter of the natural world and the supernatural world, a miracle being something different. More, it's a picture of King Jesus ruling his kingdom, ruling all of creation, showing that he is the Messiah. And here we see again the disciples are totally amazed at what Jesus can do. But having seen the feeding of the 5,000, why are they so amazed when he walks on water? We need to take note, perhaps. It's so easy for us, who are not there with him, to miss what Jesus is doing around us and be amazed at the things that should be perfectly obvious to us. So to close, our thoughts for today, Mark describes the people around Jesus as sheep without a shepherd. Surely that sums up our society. Jesus says to his disciples, you give them something to eat. And we're reminded, aren't we, that God chooses to work through his people, and he chooses to work through us today. And they were completely amazed, for they'd not understood the loaves. As we've said, we too can miss the perfectly obvious. So in closing, next time we'll run into Christmas with an Advent theme. Then in the new year, I think as we said in the church meeting, all being well, we'll start meeting in church again for house group in alternate weeks. We'll do a Zoom meeting one week, and then we'll meet in church the following week. Hopefully this will allow those who can't do Zoom to join us at house group, and those who don't really want to meet together and come out on the cold evenings to carry on meeting on Zoom. As ever, we'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work, we'll do something different. So enjoy thinking about this, and let's hope we can enjoy talking about it in house group as well.